Hi, it's Dr. Stephen Smith. I'm an integrative medicine physician. Today, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about chronic stress and why it's so deadly and why we need to take steps to relieve chronic stress and give ourselves a chance to recover. As part of my history taking over the last 20 or 30 years, I see these many people with a chronic illness, and they can be all sorts of things. They usually come in with a variety of symptoms. And one of my favorite questions is, when were you last well? Oh, they might say, about 10 years ago I felt pretty good. What happened? Well, I got pregnant with my third child, some auto wreck, I went through a divorce. You get the idea. Some kind of stress entered your life. So how does this result in an illness? We all have a physiological reserve. When we run out of reserves, we get ill or we die. And in environmental medicine, we call this total load, and if your total load is greater than your reserves, you're going to be sick or you're going to die. Unlike typical medicine, where you try to name something and give it a name, diabetes or whatever, hypertension, and here, take this pill. With chronic illness, we need to deal with the factors that are underlying the disease. And the first thing we need to do is work on that total load, reducing that load. That can be emotional load, it can be lack of sleep, it can be chemical load, heavy metals, dysbiosis or digestive problems. All of these can be load. And in most patients, it's not one thing, it's a combination of these things, and they've just accumulated to the point where they're ill. So a single type of approach where you're just going to address one thing typically is not that successful. So what we need to do is look at the person as a whole, look at all those stresses, and just start working on them one by one. And the usual first place to start is with the gut, because most people with chronic illness also have a hyperpermeable bowel. What does that mean? In the bowel, the cells are hooked together with tight junctions. These you can't see with the naked eye or even with a regular microscope. It takes an electron microscope to see these. Through stresses, bacterial or other, these can be depleted or broken up so that bacteria and other particles that are in the bowel and are supposed to stay in the bowel get into the bloodstream. As one of my teachers says, the bowel is sort of poopy, and the stuff gets into the bloodstream, it's not good. Now, the other area that's also protected by a barrier is the brain. It's called the blood-brain barrier. If the same forces start to make it permeable, then you get this brain fog. So you may eat something and all of a sudden you can't think very well. You're tired, fatigued, foggy. That's brain fog, and that's due to a hyperpermeable blood-brain barrier. So the first step in dealing with most chronic diseases is to work on the GI tract and get that going. And then we start reducing the stress and looking at all the other factors in load. Now, how do we recover from that? Well, sleep is the time that our body recovers. Our body does not run all the time at the same pace. Each organ has its period of time for recovery during the night. So if you're waking up every night at the same time, you might look at that organ clock and see what time that is. Well, typically 1 or 2 o'clock is a common time when people wake up, and that's when the liver is doing its regeneration, and so that suggests that you might have some liver stress. So if you have a chronic illness, what I like to do and what we do in the profession is we do a inventory, an MSQ test, which takes symptoms in each organ field, and we score each one of those and we add them up for a total. If you've got 20 points or less, you're probably doing pretty good. If you got 110 points, then you're probably doing pretty bad, and goes up to even higher. So we work on each one of these areas individually, and as a whole, then the person starts to get better.